Additional charges looming, prosecutors heavily hint the case against Mayor Adams may expand, adding allegations to the federal indictment. Today, City Council Minority Leader Joe Borelli goes on the record. Councilman, thanks for joining us today. It's good to see you.
You too.
So the mayor's trying to be business as usual. He says that's the way forward to run the city. He's referring most questions to his lawyer. Can he keep running the city?
I think it's a tough question to answer. I mean, certainly I have utmost confidence that the fires will get put out by the fire department and the garbage will get picked up by the sanitation workers. I think the real question for him is whether he has the political capital to do any of his signature policy proposals. Does he have the political capital to get some priorities done in next year's budget? That's really where you're going to see him face a challenge. In the city of Yes, it might be on life support at this point. It was always going to be a controversial proposal. But without, real political chips to play poker, I don't know if the mayor's going to have much luck.
You're talking about the mayor's expansive proposal to rezone housing, which we won't get into now, but just so our viewers get caught up. Let's talk about the Marist poll that just came out. It said that about 2/3 of New Yorkers, a little more than 2/3, want the mayor to resign, and that if he doesn't, about 2/3 also want the governor to remove him. So is it time for him to resign, or is it time for the governor to act?
Yeah, those are certainly not good poll numbers for the mayor, and as a Marist alum, I would never doubt their veracity. Unfortunately, though, those voters are going to have their say. If he chooses not to resign, he's going to run again in June, and those folks can vote for him or against him. I just am not one of those people who regularly calls on people to resign based on the accusations of the Department of Justice. We've seen them act in a partisan manner before. We've seen some convictions from the U.S. Attorney's Southern District get overturned in the Cuomo administration, for example. So the mere fact that someone's accused of something, I won't demand they resign or not stand for office again. Ultimately, again, all those voters are going to have their say in June in the Democratic primary and then November in the general election.
So let's talk about those voters. You have previously said that if the mayor resigns or is forced out, you would throw your hat into the ring so that this conversation didn't get dragged to the left, in your words. Is that still your intention? Any thought to actually just running next year?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you see who's chiming in saying the mayor should resign. It's mostly people on the political left who are upset about some things that he was doing. That's neither here nor there. But they're all people that want to run. And I think if any one of those happens to win, it won't put our city on the right trajectory. I think there's a lot of appetite for a mayor, even if they're serving a short term, just the balance of Mayor Adams' term. I think there is a majority of Americans who want to see their streets finally get rid of open-air drug markets and prostitution. We want to see a mayor use the 30-day, 60-day evictions to start to wind down the migrant crisis. And we want to see a whole host of things that someone who's moderate can do. And Henry, next time you guys have a consultant on Pix On Politics, ask them why there's so much belief that progressives would win in a ranked choice race. The last time we had a ranked choice race, Eric Adams and Catherine Garcia, the two most moderate candidates, were the ones who got the most votes at the end of the day. So now you're opening that election up, ranked choice, nonpartisan, to everyone, Republicans, blanks, independents, and anyone who's registered to vote in New York City. So I think I'd have a good chance, especially when people realize that their frustrations could actually be addressed by someone who's not pandering to the woke left.
So you're saying that the ranked choice wouldn't work against you with the progressives sort of rallying, behind one candidate through the ranking system. Instead, you'd try to recruit the moderates and, of course, the Republican supporters.
That's what I'm saying, Henry, and I want you to ask the next time you have a Democratic consultant saying the opposite, I want you to ask them why it didn't work in the Democratic primary when it was only limited to Democrats.
Let's talk about matching campaign finance, because you wrote an op-ed about this saying that there leaves room for corruption. Certainly, federal prosecutors pointed to the matching campaign funds in this indictment of the mayor. That being said, it's designed to give political underdogs, or those who are underfunded, sort of a leg up to compete in politics. Should the whole system be reevaluated in your view? Should part of the system be reevaluated? What's the fix here?
Look, I'm not questioning the motives or the interest in the public in helping underdogs win races. That's not what it's about. But we've seen decades of corruption through this system, going back to the very guy who actually thought up the idea and introduced the bill. He was convicted of straw donor campaign violations. We just had, the day after I published that op-ed, literally the day after, we had another indictment of a person running for Brooklyn Borough President who, again, used straw donors to try to bilk the taxpayer out of their money. So this has been a system that has only led to corruption and really not prevented anything. We're not any less corrupt than we were, 25 years ago, as evidenced by all the indictments and seizures and federal raids. The only difference is we pay about $130, $140 million every time we have an election.
Let's talk about some of these big House races we have here in New York, particularly in Long Island and in the Hudson Valley. I'm actually hosting next week a New York 17 debate, a New York 18 debate. We have a New York 17 debate coming up. So a lot of focus on these races. What messages, in your view, particularly for Republicans who you, of course, are in more touch with, are resonating with voters in the suburbs?
Look, it's the economy and it's the migrant crisis. It's the border. This might not be the case in urban New York City, but it sure as heck is the case out on Long Island and in the Hudson Valley. We see people like Mike Lawler, who many have discounted over the last 2 years. He's actually leading in most of the polls. On Long Island, President Trump's not unpopular, if you haven't noticed, on Long Island. So in other parts of the state, where he might be dragging some candidates down in the city, that's not the case in Long Island.
What about Governor Hochul's approval? Let's talk about that, because her approval, according to Pix 11's recent exclusive polling with Emerson College in the Hill, it just found that 29% of New Yorkers approve of the job she's doing. Let's compare that to President Biden, for example, at 43%. There's the graphic right there. In the same way that you're saying former President Trump might be lifting Republicans in the burbs, is the governor dragging down Democrats in the suburbs?
Yeah, and I think we saw that as part of the fallout from the governor's race 2 years ago, where Lee Zeldin narrowly lost to her. That was a race no one even thought Lee Zeldin had any chance. And yet it was in these, specifically the swing battleground districts of Long Island and the Hudson Valley, where Republicans picked up speed. I don't think you're seeing the same support for Kamala Harris that you might have saw for Joe Biden, certainly not that you saw perhaps against Donald Trump in 2018. So it's going to be tough for those 5 or 6 seats where Democrats think they have a chance of taking back a seat. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for them to pick up ground. Certainly, the one to watch is Anthony D'Esposito. That's probably the toughest seat. But in some of the recent polling, he's doing pretty good, and we really shouldn't expect that to change too much over the next 30 days. Of
course, Congressman D'Esposito, controversy over who he's hired and put into his office. I'm not going to go into much detail there because I don't want to go after the congressman without giving him a chance to defend himself, but we've reported on that. Finally here, I did just want to talk a little bit more about the migrant situation. Truly resonating in the suburbs, and here's why I ask, because I've spoken with immigrant advocate groups in the suburbs and say that physically there's just not a lot of migrants who filtered their way into, say, Suffolk County or the upper Hudson Valley. Really? You're hearing that is a big issue or a big concern?
Yeah, I mean, number one, it's a big issue nationally. I mean, certainly in every single poll you see about swing states and swing districts, immigration is right up there with the economy and what's driving people's likelihood of voting. So that doesn't just not exist because it's Long Island, for argument's sake. And when you factor in the idea that just about every household in Long Island, or a large percentage of them, have at least one member who's commuting to work in Manhattan or Brooklyn or somewhere in between, it's not as though these suburban counties are living in isolation from New York City. They are part and parcel to its environment. You have something like 1.52 million people visiting Manhattan every day for work. Those are folks that are coming in from the suburban counties who are encountering the sort of open-air street crime that we feared back in the 80s and 90s. And I'm not a hyperbolist. I'm not going to say that this is as bad as it was in 1985 or so, but it is a marked difference than it was just a few years ago in 2016 and 2017, when our city really hit a peak.
Councilman, thank you very much for spending some time with us, both to talk about the mayor and to chop up the House races. Always good to chat with you.
You too, Henry.